Welcome to the latest segment of Moments Off the Mat presented by USA Wrestling. I'm Tony Black, Director of State Services for USA Wrestling. I'm joined today by Stacey Davis, current coach and retired former official at the international level. Stacey, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Tony. Appreciate it.
You bet. So, Stacey, it's Friday, July 17th right now. I'm talking to you. I'm in Colorado Springs. You're in Powder Springs, Georgia. Where I think we should be both in Fargo today.
Yeah, well, I would have arrived sometime yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah, we probably would have been on the same flight. I'm a Delta guy, so right, you'd have been flying. You'd have been flying Delta. Well, we can't chat in person in Fargo, but we're going to do the Zoom interview today, and yeah, that's going to have to suffice.
It's the times we live in.
Cool. All right. Well, again, Stacey, thanks for joining us. So here it's 2020. We're going to wind the clock back a little bit. Talk about your first year in Fargo. I know you went out as a coach, but wound up officiating. What did that look like in 1998?
As I recall, when I went out there, Paula McGahee, who was the current state chair at that point in time, had taken me out as a coach. And one of the conversations we had out there is, well, why don't you see if you can get on the mat? Well, you know, I was very blessed in that, you know, Roy Pittman, Bill Speckline, and obviously Rick Tucci said, yeah, we'll give him a shot. We'll let him get on the mat and see what he can do. And, you know, as you say, you look at the past and look behind you, it worked out okay. So worked out. It was a different animal, so to say.
Cool. And neat to hear that Roy Pittman, Roy being from Portland, had you ever met Roy before that, or was that your first?
That was the conversation as I'd come out, and Roy was working weigh-ins, so I was obviously there with some of my athletes going to weigh-ins, and struck up a conversation. You know, being an African-American man, he was asked, what are you out here doing? I said, you know, came out to coach. He asked the lead-in question, you ever done any officiating? Yeah, I just did the regionals and, you know, a lot of local stuff. And he says, you thought about being out here? I said, well, you know, that was a conversation I was going to have, but I didn't know what the process was to get on the mats out here. I'd love to be on the mats out here. I actually brought all my stuff just in case. And Roy said, well, let me go talk to a few people. And I guess he talked to the right two.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I like hearing Roy Pittman stories. So obviously back in the day, officiating in Fargo, you spent many nights in Pavic Hall. You want to talk about your hot nights in Pavic? How's the air conditioning or anything like that?
Well, we talk about Pavic. That's where, you know, most of the officials have stayed. That was our housing. And ironically, the years before that I was out there, you know, the first couple years out there, I stayed with Team Georgia in, you know, Symes Hall or wherever they had the team assigned. And that was a whole new level of hot that, you know, at night feels like 90-some degrees inside the room. So obviously when they said, well, why don't you come stay at Pavic, I did. And I found out what the concept of forced air really meant. It was just hot air moving around at a different rate. But Pavic had some extremely warm nights as well. It made me appreciate what true air conditioning truly meant versus forced air. So Pavic shared some good memories in my back and some hot memories as well.
Yeah, so Stacey, you might get a kick out of this. So for a long while, I was the individual from USA Wrestling who would submit some of the rooming requests to NDSU. And every year I would get the same request from Chris Curtis or, you know, Ginger Lyle. Hey, can I have this set of rooms? These, you know, these 5 or these 4. And I never really paid attention because they wanted to be on the north side of the dorm, right? Because it was a little bit cooler because it wasn't getting as much sun throughout the day. So they came back from you know, the Fargo Dome, and it might be 92 in the room instead of 97.
Yeah, true. Very true. You know, the guys I wound up rooming with for the number of years in Pavic, we had a certain set of rooms. We like to try to get about the 5th floor, you know, easy enough to get up to in case everybody was on the elevator. But also depending on where the rooms were set up, much, much cooler than being in certain parts of that dormitory.
Yep. Yep. Um, so the early days in Fargo, as an official, do you ever have any experience with uh, mosquitoes, let's say?
uh, so I was warned before I ever went to Fargo that you should always cover up. Me covering up is like I am right now. I'm in some shorts and a t-shirt, and I feel that's pretty covered up. So the first time I went up there, and I don't know if they started spraying at that point in time or not, but I walked across the grass. We're going to the dome to get ready for competition, and I swatted a couple of the national birds, which are quote unquote the mosquitoes in North Dakota, and I didn't think anything about it. Well, when it cooled down that evening, we decided we're going out for a social. Well, I've got jeans on, and I couldn't figure out why I was continually swatting my legs, trying to figure out. I got a pair of jeans on. It must be some itchy material. Something's not right. Well, the next morning I get up and my legs are just covered with whelps because I'd walked across the grass, taking a shortcut, trying to get onto the pavement, going where we were going, and learned a very, very valuable lesson. That was probably the last time. And even now, when I go to or would have been in Fargo, I tend to find concrete versus walking across the grass from that very memory of all the whelps that I had on my arms and legs from being eaten alive by those mosquitoes. So they got my respect, so to say.
Yeah. Yep. The days of Fargo before the city was spraying are way different than now.
Oh,
So,
night and day.
yep. So from an official standpoint, do you have any highlight or any memorable moment? Maybe the first time you got on mat one on the elevated stage.
Yeah. So ironically, we talk about, that 98, 99 window was my first time being out in Fargo and being on the mat. And, I remember doing maybe these were the quarters or semis in rotation, and wondering how I'm doing. And conversation came, and I think it was Bill Steckline that came over, or Rick. I can't remember which one it was. I think it was more like Rick. Now, this has been a Bill thing. Bill Steckline came over to me after a match and said, "Your belt line's out of alignment." And I thought about, I must have done okay on the mat. Out of all the things he could have said to me, was that just straighten up your belt line. Okay. Well, ironically, later on that evening, I find out I get assigned to officiate a Greco finals match as a first year guy out in Fargo. I was told when I came off the mat, you're probably the first and last M3 at that level to ever officiate a Fargo match. Now that's happened, it's changed since then, just because of logistics and things that happened over the last couple of decades. But I thought it was kind of cool, um, being that guy first year in Fargo to actually pull and get the whistle a finals match. So yeah, so the first time I was in Fargo, I get to do a national championship match at the cadet level. So it's pretty cool.
Really cool. That's really cool. And that was as an M3. Obviously, you progressed way beyond M3, right? For those that don't know, M3 is the introductory level of
Mm-hmm.
officiating. So
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
cool. So when you think about it, Stacey, do you have any stories, from previous years in Fargo or a story that every time you think of, you can't help but laugh and reminisce with your buddies about?
Yeah. So all of us coming out, especially a group I spent a lot of time with, we're all high school coaches, or we're active in our local states as coaches. So we all felt like we still could wrestle a little bit. So as you used to know, over in the Bison, they put down multiple mats. You cut out a time to go work out. Well, we all decide doing an off session to go work out, and we kind of get after it a little bit. And I'm not the smallest guy, but I was in pretty good shape at that point in time as well. And obviously, everybody wants to test and see how good they really are. At the end of the conversation, I was told, "Well, that's the last time I ever work out with you." So needless to say, I always laugh about that. I can't say it's because I was bigger. I just say, as I always told him, I just need to get my hands on you, and we'll go from there. So yeah, I laugh about that all the time, and quite a few times you'll talk to Ron Fazio or Eric Pageman, who's retired since then. Those guys will start laughing, and Zach Garrett, all of us is like, yeah, I'm done with that. So we found out we weren't quite as young as we used to be.
What's that Toby Keith song? I ain't as good as I once was.
Yeah, something like that.
So obviously you spent many hours on the whistle in Fargo, but you also coached your sons, Lee and Rod,
Yeah.
more Rod than Lee, I think, in Fargo, while you were officiating. And then once you had hung up your whistle, you want to talk a little bit about coaching your sons in Fargo, and then what it was like, or what it's been like coaching other wrestlers in Fargo, since you retired as an official too.
It's as a coach, it's a learning lesson, and it's kind of tough sometimes to separate, being dad first and then coach second. But I take Lee. It might have been a match for a blood round out in Fargo, and happened, and one of the coaches said, "Hey, sit down, take the corner. You don't know when this is going to happen again." And ironically, that was his last Fargo, so I got to coach him there. And again, leading up to it, when we were at all the national camps and things of that such, a lot of hands-on work trying to prepare him for that level of competition. When his match was over, and I was like, if I ever get this opportunity with Rod, I'm not going to waste it. And that's one of the learning lessons that I took from that match with Lee. Just the mere fact of being in his corner, trying to help him get through some situations. With Rod, proved a huge difference. He had a phenomenal Fargo his senior year, finished third in Greco and then blood round and freestyle. So it was a good showing for him. I take that a step further, and I tell kids nowadays, when I step in your corner, I'm going to coach you like you're my sons. That means you're going to get everything I got to give you, and I only ask that you give me, meet me halfway, so to say. But that, so it's really helped me learn to be a better coach and to be as passionate as I am. As I tell a guy, if I'm going to take your corner, I'm going to coach you just like you're my sons, and you can take that for what it's worth. But that means I want to see you do as well as you possibly can do. So.
Yeah, that's great. Great words of advice too, for other coaches, right? Hey, I'm going to coach you like you're my son, right? And you're going to get all of me. So that's great. So obviously asked a handful of Fargo questions. Last question about Fargo. What are you going to miss the most about not being in Fargo in 2020?
It's pretty simple. Seeing everybody from across the nation, and actually quite often since I've retired, you'll have some officials that have come in as UWW representatives that I've officiated with. So it's some great memories seeing those guys come in. Ordinarily, since I don't travel as much, I get to see them. But more importantly, just getting with guys, when we sit down and have a meal late at night, I'm still coaching and they're still officiating. We'll carve out some time and go somewhere and sit down and eat and just rehash and catch up and find out what's going on in each other's lives. And those opportunities are just gone this year. So it's weird sitting on my deck right now when I know where I'm normally at this time of the year. So I'll miss that opportunity to sit now, because tomorrow's not promised. So as I tell guys, you get a chance to sit down and talk, and this COVID-19 has really changed how we do things across the board. And I absolutely understood it was the right move not to have that event, but there are a lot of sad faces, and I never enjoyed the trip to Fargo. I was always happy to leave Fargo after 10, 11, 12 days of being out there. But the times when we're out there are priceless. Those are memories I can never, ever get back. So the memory of not having 2020 in Fargo is one of those ones that I've talked to all the guys I usually hang out with, and they say, yeah, we'd be in Fargo right now. And
Yeah, it kind of neat, Stacey, that you bring up all the foreign officials. I mean, I think that probably a lot of our coaches and athletes and other officials, they might take for granted the fact that, we've had Kari come in, we've had Purdy come in, we've had Ibrahim come in, Stefan Rudovics, right? Many people that, I mean, when you watch the World Championships, when you watch the Olympic Games,
mm-hmm.
there's a lot of people officiating that have officiated or been in Fargo watching
Absolutely.
our event, you know, and I mean, I think about Purdy, right? And I'm going to mispronounce his last name, Villainin or whatever. Right. I think was the official during Rulon and Karelin.
He officiated so many huge matches internationally.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And that guy was in Fargo. I mean, I think it's really neat what that event has provided international officials to see what happens in the States, but also get our domestic officials around people like that and really develop a relationship. So when you go to a tournament, you know, in Nice, France, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, we were in Fargo together, right? Those connections, you're able to make those.
Yep, absolutely. You're right. And Perty was actually the first international official to sign my license book. So I was like, so there's history all the way through here, and then to see him in Fargo or to see some of the other guys come to Fargo, it's like, hey, I know you. Yeah, I know you. And we would sit down. Obviously, we haven't seen each other 5, 6, 7 years, and just great conversations. So.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. So gonna transition out of Fargo for a second, and again wind the clock back. How did you get your start, Stacey, officiating the Olympic styles of wrestling?
Tony, ironically, I started off as a coach in Georgia. But before I was a coach, in order to get into any high school room when I first moved to Georgia, I wasn't an accredited teacher or a faculty or staff or anything associated with the high school system. The only way I could get into a wrestling room to work out or to actually, quote unquote, help officiate matches was to go in as an official. So I started off as a folk style official. Again, ironically, the place I started out happened to be one of the local schools here. Um, at that point in time, the current state chair, Paula McGahee, said, well, if you're going to be here working out during this time of year, you might as well come back in this spring. Well, what spring? Freestyle and Greco. So we start national team practices. We're also at this McEachern High School. So we started there. And then Paula said, well, you're already here. Why don't you go out with us on national team? So I did that. And one thing led to another. Once I got into freestyle and Greco as a coach, I wanted to learn more about the rules so that I could help my athletes do better. Because again, one of the things I've always picked up, whether it was folk style or whether it was freestyle or Greco, and more so Greco being my first love out of all three styles, because I had a little success in high school with that, was to go back and say, well, I need to know what officials are looking for. So what better way to do it than to actually become an official and learn the rules or philosophies of that particular discipline. So that's how I got into freestyle and Greco. Started going to some regionals and actually backed up, went to a few local tournaments, went to a regional tournament, and walked in, and it happened to be a tournament where official was about to retire, and I'm in App State, and I was just trying to figure this out and trying to see if I could do this. Or all of a sudden Bill Steckline walks in, Rick Tucci walks in, Leroy Evans, and I'm trying to figure out who the heck is this guy that is about to retire. Well, long story short, I get to see these guys interact, and I say, man, I'd like to be able to do what they are doing. So it was that moment in time that I made a decision. I'd like to be as good as they are. And all those guys were world championship level officials. And obviously, when you talk about Bill and Rick, Leroy Evans, all these guys were multiple Olympic officials. I was like, well, they've done, I can't tell you how many world championships. I'm going to watch and see what they're doing. If they're doing this, then I can learn what officials should be looking for, and I can teach my kids what they're looking for. So as I said, I started off as a coach, became an official so that I could be a better coach, became a pretty good official, and now I'm back to doing what I started off doing, coaching again. So, coaching and officiating has been intertwined throughout my entire career in this sport. So one helps the other. I'm a firm believer in that.
Yeah. So, Stacey, that might be an understatement of the day when you said I was a pretty good official. That, again, understatement. So, here's a, and this is about your officiating. There's a handful of questions in this series. As an international official, I know that you have probably countless stamps in your passport, right? From all the countries visited,
I think
all the,
countries.
say that again?
I think it's 23 countries.
23 countries that you officiated wrestling in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, and when you retired, it was, I think, right before FILA changed its name to United World Wrestling, or right,
Yeah,
right
it was
around that same time,
I
right?
think 2015 or 2016 became the official UWW logo.
Yeah. So, what in all your FILA officiating days, and those 23 stamps in your passport, what was your craziest? What was your most memorable? And what would you qualify, or what would you call your best international trip as an official?
Okay, so if you don't mind, I'm going to kind of change that around a little bit to my craziest, my best, and most memorable, and I'll explain why I'm going to say it that way. So the
Okay.
crazy one happened to be when I went across the border, went across the pond, spent 30 some hours traveling to this little place called Krasnoyarsk, Russia. So I found out what international customs were all about in one trip. From spending 15 hours overnight in a airport trying to transition to Moscow, and then taking another hopper 4 hours plus to Krasnoyarsk, and then taking a bus another 2 hours to finally get to the venue. I've been told about this tournament, since I started in 98, 99. Arguably the toughest tournament in the world to go to. The level of competition is crazy. Well, it was crazy. What was even crazier was that I was the American official there. So how do you get out of trouble with everybody else? Put the American in there. So I can't tell you how many absolute barn burner matches I had the opportunity to officiate. Um, and it was crazy because, again, in 2003, it was who was it? Jamel Kelly. I think Tina Smith was on that trip. Ramiko Blacken, Daniel Cromer. And literally, it was 6 or 7 of us on that team that were African American, and that was it. So for the mere fact that that part of the world had never ever seen a black official, I mean, to be on the mat. So when I say crazy, I really felt like a rock star because I'm walking around with security. I was like, man, this is pretty cool. But it was fun up until the point of like the 5th or 6th match in a row, whether it was the semis, which this was a money tournament. So obviously these guys are trying to earn some coin by winning this tournament. So huge difference between losing in the semis and winning the year again. So literally match after match after match after match. So it got to the point that I literally said, "This is crazy. Um, I'm done with this. I don't know if I could take the level again." It was a great learning experience, but when somebody says you're an American official, ain't gonna put you in the hot soup, it's I felt like a lobster ready to boil, so to say. Now, when we transition to my best tournament, it arguably has to be Junior Worlds in Budapest. And that's because it was an absolute beautiful setting. Where late August, early September for those world championships, or junior world championships. Beautiful. The food was fantastic. The atmosphere was incredible. Got opportunities of being put in positions as match here, or big matches that were going on, and it just everything flowed well with that. So when I talk about one of the best tournaments I've ever been in, and that ironically, Budapest, Hungary is one of my favorite cities in the world. I've always told my wife I could go back and spend a couple of weeks just doing nothing but experiencing that city. So that was my best. When you talk about memorable, it's got to be London Games. It's got to be the London Games. I had a phenomenal tournament, but it's best. It's not the best. It's the most memorable because as an Olympic official or world championship official, the officiating body is very careful about not letting you know when you're going to officiate a match. And that's so that there's no undue influence. And again, at that point in time, the conversations was that, there's a lot of corruption out here, so we're going to alleviate that by just, you don't know when you're going to officiate. Well, the most memorable moment, and it wasn't the opportunity that, Zach, Aaron, and I, who were on that trip, got to experience, a lot of London, or the fact we took 3 or 4 days and went over to France and experienced that. Um, uh, Great memories, but probably the most memorable moment is actually doing that 74 kilo Olympic gold match and having my entire family, my brother, my wife, both sons, a sister-in-law, and some other friends happen to be in town for the games, having them be in uh, the venue that night, not knowing that I'd get a chance to officiate a Greco gold match. So it was the perfect moment in my career, and I would say arguably my most memorable. Just having all those things come together, and actually got through the match okay as well. So it was a win-win, so to say. So I hope that explains why craziest, best, and most memorable went in that order.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. And chronologically, right? I think you said Kras was 03, Budapest in 2010, and then London in 2012.
Correct.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. So let me ask a question about Kras, by the way. How is it Colden Krasny in the winter?
Oh my God. So in Atlanta, I was working at IBM at the time, and there's a place called the Twin Towers. So before I knew what was going on that trip, we'd had a little weather here in the Atlanta area, and it doesn't really get cold in Atlanta, but that was an ironic time. So between the two towers, there's a wind tunnel, and it got to minus 10 degrees a couple of times going through that wind tunnel. Just freaky weather here in Georgia during that time. And I thought I was prepared for the cold. Needless to say, the level of cold was not just bone chilling in Krasny, it was eye-opening, so to say. So I still have my Russian hat that literally I sweat anytime I put it on. I call it the warmest hat, the best hat I've ever bought on an international trip, and a lot of great memories about learning what the true level of being cold through multiple layers. I would tell you, I had a long trench coat on, I had a jacket under that, I had the officials' gear under that, I had thermals under that. Doesn't matter. I was still cold. So yeah, it gets a little cold there.
Yes, yes. So I hear. Yeah, never been, but yeah, Krasnoyarsk in January, right for the Urigan. Man, oh man. So you talked about on that trip, and you were naming, right, Tina and Jamil and Cormier, and yourself, right, all African Americans.
Yep, Jamil Kelly. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
future medalist. So
So I'm curious, Stacey, in the ranks of UWW or FILA, and even USA Wrestling, USWOA, you're absolutely one of the leaders of Black people in our country, in our sport. Is that is there? Do you want to talk about that? How that has helped you, or when Roy Pittman reached out to you in 1998, have you paid that forward? Have you brought other officials on that journey, both people of color and white officials, to help bridge that gap, to educate, anything along those lines?
yes and no. When I say yes, there have been a lot of people I've introduced or felt that had a lot of opportunities in the sport. Um, the catch-22 about this sport, as anything, especially on the officiating side, it really bases back down to longevity. A lot of guys that I thought would have been extremely successful have either made changes, because a lot of people need to understand in the United States, officiating international um, sports or international wrestling is a hobby. Guys coming to Fargo are basically taking 2 weeks of vacation to come out there. Now I know they do a little stipend now, but for years and years and years, guys were bearing the burden of coming out there just because of the event, things of that such. So it became cost prohibitive for a lot of guys who haven't gone through. Now, as a black official coming through the system, I've seen both sides of it. My philosophy is never let color stand in your way. Try to be the best you can be out on the mat. Present yourself that way, and if it's meant to work out, it will work out. And then understanding how to get through the political ball. And if you can do that, then the sky's the limit. Are there a lot of young officials that I see up and coming? Yes. And I'm excited to see if they can stay into it. But also, when I was coming through, it was a little brutal in that, Zach Garrett, who's a UWW education manager, has done a phenomenal job of really transitioning the sport so that is you're not having officials beat you up to get you better. When I was coming through, there were a lot of guys that got beat up and simply said, I'm done with this. I don't have to take this abuse. I'm not getting paid to do this, so why am I doing this? Me, I felt it was a challenge. Every time somebody told me I couldn't do something, that challenge was, I'm gonna see if I can do it. There are countless guys that say you'll never make it to be an Olympic official, and I said, you know what? Maybe not, but that's my goal. And if it's meant to be, it will be. Actually, it worked out okay. And then when it became to the point that my sons were done, I got to a point that it just wasn't fun anymore. I stepped away, but I haven't stepped away because I'm still coaching, and I'm still watching the rules, and I hope guys take that to understand that even though I stepped away, continue to do it, continue to enjoy the sport, continue, as I say, my biggest motto in my back age of my career is having more fun. There are times when it's not fun. There's times when, guys are going through and trying to figure out, do I want to keep doing this? What is my ultimate goal? Is it just to help out locally, which is absolutely fine? Or do I have a bigger aspiration in this sport? And they've got to make that their own personal decision. I know some guys who come in as great officials, but they spend more time coaching. That's their passion. And again, ironically, as I say, looking back, I absolutely understand that because I started off as a coach, and I'm still a coach who became, as I said, a pretty good official. So those guys, I hope to find anytime I'm at a venue and I see a young official, a black official, or white official, if I see they're pretty good, hey, I'll go over and say, hey, you keep plugging. Don't worry about it. Not every call is going to work out your way. You just try to do what you feel is best, and it'll shake out. And time and opportunity, you'll get that call right. And somebody told me that once upon a time, and that was on the folk style side. And I've carried that with me for years and years and years. Sean Hay, who was one of Georgia's most successful wrestlers at the high school level, his dad, Brian, told me, you know what, the call's the call. If it's there, make your call and feel good about it. Don't worry about it. As long as you feel good about it and you're doing the right thing, you'll be fine. Nate Carr told me the exact same thing years later. So, I tie those guys in from a coach to an athlete, to, Bill Steckline or Jack Bowman, who all those guys came back and said, if you keep working towards this and keep progressing, you're going to be fine. And I say that to all the young officials out there. Just keep working, keep progressing. And, as I say, I always tell guys, I'm accessible. If there's anything I can do to help them progress in the sport, I will. Because, as I said, when I stepped away, one of the things in the back of my head was, who's going to be the next guy? Let me get out of the way while I'm still have a good feeling about the sport, and let this next guy step in, have that opportunity. Sometimes guys don't age out. They stay in too long. And that's just my personal opinion. But, I wanted to step aside and let another young guy come in, and hopefully he'll have as much success as I did, or more. I like seeing these guys develop and become the next big gun, so to say.
Yeah, that's neat to hear. Obviously, coming from you, Stacey, right? Someone who progressed from an M3, like we talked about back in 1998, officiating in Fargo, to officiating an Olympic gold medal match in front of your family in 2012 in London. And to recognize, hey, there's other people, and I'm not going to leave. I'm going to leave before I'm disenfranchised, before I'm sick of this, right? I mean, you chose to retire what I would say is absolutely at the pinnacle as an Olympic official, and still have a real healthy perspective on the sport, because you didn't leave as an official after taking too many beatings and disgruntled, right? So it's neat to hear you speak fondly of your experiences as an official, and that you're still involved in the sport as a coach.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. It's ingrained in my blood. And as I said, the more I learn in Greco, the more I learn in freestyle, the more I'm able to help my high school team in folk style. So there's so many nuances that the international style really helps our kids. I just wish more of them were doing it. You know, somebody asked me, well, why do you love Greco? I said, you know what? Because there's limited opportunities to score, and you got to find a way to score. You know, you take freestyle, there are more opportunities to score. You take folk style, there are infinite ways of scoring with that. And, you know, those little nuances, um, I hope reflect in my teams nowadays that I try to coach, and hopefully make them a better athlete at the end of the day. And if they're folk style only, that's great. If they're folk style and freestyle only, that's great. But if they're Greco, hey, I want to see if we can find one of those kids. I've always dreamt of coaching a kid who went on and became an Olympic medalist or gold medalist. You know, that is still passionate of my coaching, to see one of those kids develop all the way through, because as you say, that's the pinnacle of the sport. There's no bigger cherry out there than being an Olympic champion. So uh, I'll keep working towards that goal, you know, with the young kids. And, you know, there are a few that's like, they got a shot, but it's a long path towards it. So
Yeah. So is that a call to action for any kid in the Atlanta area or Powder Springs to, hey, if you got an Olympic gold medal aspiration, Stacey wants to get you there?
absolutely. And that applies to anybody. It was ironic. We had a pretty good, just a little side story. We had a great tournament as our cadet level team out in Washington State last year. And it was ironic. Several of the parents came over and said, well, you know, obviously COVID-19 changed a lot of things, but, you know, can we come down to Georgia and train with the Greco guys? Absolutely. And if your goal is to be the best you can be, because the only way that we're going to get better is to keep getting pushed. You know, if you're satisfied at the level you're at, you'll stay at that level. But if you want to look to be the best of the best, then you'll keep pushing yourself, keep finding opportunities to motivate you. So, yeah, so that's not only a shout out to the guys here in Powder Springs, Georgia, the state of Georgia, or the United States. It doesn't matter. I want to see our guys get better and win international medals at the end of the day, because that's ultimately the goal if you're going to stay in the sport, or officiate an Olympic gold medal match.
Yep, that's the thing. What I would say is a challenge everybody else that has, any aspirations as an official too. When you see Stacey at a tournament, by all means, pick his brain, ask him questions, right? He's someone who's lived it, again, starting as an M3 and reaching that pinnacle as an Olympic official in London. So obviously a very good individual to reach out to. So yeah, sorry that I made you available. But no, Stacey, I don't have any more questions for you. Obviously, we talked a little bit about Fargo, and that was the point of getting on this interview with you today. Again, it's July 17th, and we should be in Fargo, right? That's what we're all thinking.
Yes,
you touched on it.
You're here on this call talking to each other in two
Yep,
different.
and what's funny is I think most people have the same. They all look forward to getting home after Fargo, but man, oh man, there really is something special about that tournament and the people, the friends from around the country that you get to blow the whistle with, that you get to coach against, that you get to go to Buffalo Wild Wings and eat some wings with.
Ate a
And
lot of those hot wings there.
yeah, I choose not to eat the hot wings, man. I don't need to sweat anymore. So no, it was great chatting with you. Anything else that you want to say, Stacey, before we sign off here?
Well, let's hope that we get a cure for the COVID-19. As I tell people, wear your mask. It's not about being proud. It's about being an opportunity of seeing next year. I wish everybody to be safe, healthy, and if God willing, we'll see everybody in Fargo 2021. It should be a blast, the reunion.
Yep, that will be one heck of a deal, right? So,
Yeah, absolutely.
hopefully, I see you before then in person, Stacey. But obviously, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so with that, we'll sign off this latest segment of Moments Off the Mat. Again, I'm Tony Black. We've had Stacey Davis from Georgia join us today. Thanks again, Stacey.
My pleasure. Have a good day.